Hello, hello, guys.
What's
What's
up,
up,
guys? Good
guys? Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning.
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 We're Friday, March 27th, 2020, um, also known as the year of the pandemic, I guess, if someone's to watch this many years from now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure.
And
And
yesterday
yesterday
we
we
saw we're the
we're the
most
most
cases in
cases
the
in the
world,
world,
which is
which is
amazing. So we
so
surpassed
past
China
China
and
and
Italy.
Italy.
Yep, that's sort of an ominous way to start our broadcast today, but this is the truth. Cases are skyrocketing now. Everyone's working from home, and here we are talking employee connectedness. Today, we're going to focus on all of the policy that is changing in real time in the federal government in the United States related to employees right now. And there's a lot, and nothing is fully decided. I was saying to my wife, right now, every day feels like a week, and every week feels like a month with the rapid changes that we're experiencing across our, home life, our culture, our work. So as we take things day by day, I thought it'd be great to have a show where we think about the sort of nuts and bolts of what's being proposed, of how companies need to work with their employees and so forth. And we're lucky to have Martin Lowe here of OnPlane Consulting, who studies this stuff and knows this world as well as anyone. And of course, Brad Shuck, Dr. Brad Shuck here, who's a researcher at the University of Louisville, studying employee engagement on the employee experience. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. Martin, if you want to jump into it, I'm going to put on our screen this fancy presentation you have. And here we
Charlie, I think I lost you there, though. All right. So, there's quite a bit going on the federal level, and to Charlie's point, days feel like weeks. This was rather up to date as of Sunday night, and has changed a little bit, but directionally, I think all the information that's in here gives you an idea of just current state and where things are. So if you go to the next slide, Charlie. Um, we want to talk a little bit about just trying to tell the story and trying to frame up uh, where the government's head seems to be in terms of current state and what's happening, how the government's responding. And then there's a number of things that we probably won't get into that are inside of this deck around, medical insurance response, community response, things for businesses to consider. We'll talk at the time a little bit about some of those things for businesses to consider as we go through the tier 1, 2, and 3 responses. So, Charlie, if you go to the next slide. So, you think about current state and where we are today and how did we get there. So, obviously, unprecedented impacts to our society. And it's really not so much about this disease in and of itself being this horrific Ebola-like threat, but what it is it spreads very quickly. And because it spreads quickly and because we don't have a lot of natural immunity to this, we don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. And so what the government's been stuck with is an overwhelming public health crisis, because and most people have seen this, this was from the New York Times by way of The Economist. But basically, you have this much capacity in the healthcare system. If we don't slow this down, we overrun our hospitals and cause people who need treatment to not get treatment. And people who probably could make it through this with treatment can't get treatment. And either they have significant issues, or others who don't have this but need treatment can't get into the hospital because they're already overwhelmed. And so what the government's done is they've said, hey, we're going to shut everything down to avoid this overload of the hospital system. But now they're stuck in between this rock and a hard place of, we're saving lives and doing the right things for our people, and the healthcare system. But now we have an economic crisis that comes on the heels of that. So if you go to the next slide. So, what they're doing is this unprecedented response, and they're looking at this in steps. And a lot of this is because it has happened so fast. I mean, if you told me at the beginning of March that at the end of March that we would see companies lay off or furlough employees, that we would see the liquidity system and banking system stretched, if you told me that pretty much everybody I work with would be triaging their business in a significant way by the end of March, I would have told you were crazy. And so what's happening is the government's just trying to move as quickly as they can, which in government terms, they move very quickly, but in, terms of this, it hasn't seemed fast enough. But what they've done is they responded in these tiers. So tier one was around financial systems liquidity and the actions taken by the Federal Reserve Bank. They've taken actions above and beyond this, but this really started about 2 weeks ago. Tier two is supporting social safety nets. We've seen a significant rise in unemployment applications and in need for the healthcare system and that sort of stuff. And so this is all about those social safety nets. Tier three, which we think will come through this week, is the Coronavirus Economic Stabilization Act. Somehow they made it into CARES. I don't know who was in charge of setting that up, as I've been trying to put the acronym together and haven't had any success with it. But that's the act. It's sitting with the House, and they expect to have a vote on that this morning. So next slide. So, tier one was all about economic fears being worse than COVID-19 actual impacts. And that's not to diminish the impacts from this virus or to say that it's not a big deal. It is, but there's a lot of borrowed fear out there in the world right now, and that's causing a lot of issues on the financial system. Doesn't, for what we do, have a lot of impact on the people ops or the people side of a business, but is important because it allows liquidity, frees up cash, reduces borrowing costs significantly, and really what they're trying to do is avoid things like bank runs or someone's inability to get cash, because so many people have been drawing down their lines of credit that the banks are struggling to actually, fund those loans. All right, so to the next slide. So tier two is all about social safety net. So significant increase in funding for WIC, which is food stamps, medical care, unemployment, basically saying we know that a lot of people are going to get put out of work. We want to make sure that they still have the ability to get the basic services that they need, because we don't want someone to be put in a really bad position by this. They also enacted a number of legislative changes around paid leave requirements for companies, and a lot of companies are trying to sort out how they deal with this. But it's 2 weeks of paid sick leave requirements for all companies under 500 employees, 12 weeks of FMLA required for all companies under 500 employees, and 10 weeks of that time, up to 10 weeks of that time, is considered paid time off. And what they've done is basically they took these leave provisions that either used to not be in place in the form of paid sick leave or not in place in the form of FMLA, and tried to cover this blanket group of companies, these small businesses that are all impacted by this today or may be impacted by it tomorrow. But this under 500, and the way that they expanded the coverage on there is going to impact most employees that are out there. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to drive cash through the business to the employee instead of driving it through the unemployment system, to keep these businesses stood up and keep the employees there as they're part of it. And they've put a bunch of tax incentives in there to fund those paid leaves. All right, so if we go to the next slide, there's a ton of information in here. This Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act is part of that. It's going to start on April 2nd, ends December 31st. The threshold changes from over 500 employees to fewer than 500, or over 50 employees to fewer than 500 employees, which is basically any small business. Eligible employees goes from someone who's had to be there for 6 months and worked a minimum number of hours to someone who's been there 30 calendar days, which is significant. And then adds in anybody who is unable to work or telework due to need to care for son or daughter under 18 years of age, if the school or place of care has been closed that those people go to, which for all of us who are dealing with school closures, it's just a tremendous number of people. There are some exclusions inside of there, but this was put together pretty quick. There's no past precedent on it, and it's kind of confusing about how to go about it. If it were me, I would look at this as though it's going to impact my business. I need to make a plan for it, and hopefully business owners see this as the right things to do for their people, and knowing that it's going to be backed by the government and that they can get some tax credits on the back end for it is great. So next slide. So there's a requirement to pay. So FMLA was unpaid. Now there's a requirement to pay, and it's really put in place in response to all the COVID-19 stuff. This helps people just, again, with the safety net. I think the way that the government's viewing this is they're saying, hey, look, unprecedented health crisis. We don't want the economy to go really south. And instead of someone coming off the company's employment and going on unemployment, if we just keep them employed and connected to the business, it makes the business that much faster to spin up later. And instead of giving them money through the unemployment system, we're going to fund it through the employer, keep them employed, and keep that business intact and as a going concern. All right, so next slide. And then this is a little bit about tax credits. This is capped, but it's covering 100% of the cost to employers. Because one of the things we've seen, the first thing that every employer has said is like, well, we can't afford that. We're trying to keep our operation going. We definitely can't add that on. So this is great that they've put this in place and that helps out. So next slide. And then tier 3. So this is what everyone is watching right now, specifically for small businesses. There's federal support coming through the SBA and tax relief for businesses under 500 employees. They're looking at making loans and making them very quickly to small businesses with different eligibility provisions. Those aren't perfectly clear yet, but essentially what they're saying is we don't know who's going to be able to pay and who's not going to be able to pay. So instead of us trying to sort out whether or not you have enough assets or you're liquid, because almost everybody's not liquid right now, they're going to do things like look at your payroll and give you, if you've got, say, your 1 month's worth of payroll is $10,000, they might just take that times 2 or 3 or 4 and say, all right, well, we're going to spot you for 3 months because we think that's what you need to weather the storm. Here's 30 grand. And then in the back end of that, if you're using it for wages and you're using it to pay off, rent and those sort of things, they're going to forgive up to 100% of those dollars spent. And what that allows them to do then is keep these businesses up, keep people paid, and instead of putting money into someone's pocket through unemployment, they're pushing it through the business. All right, so I think this ends up being really good, especially if it allows you to do all this. These are some other odds and ends that are in here, but it's all around payroll support, supporting costs of medical leave, supporting salaries, mortgage payments, debt obligations. These are things that you normally would not have gotten an SBA loan for. But they're doing that, and then they're also allowing, at least the first pass of this that was done over the weekend, allowed for loan payments to be deferred as well. So, really an unprecedented move to try and shore up businesses. So, next slide. Yep, so we talked a little bit about loan forgiveness. There's a couple things in here that I think are really important as a business is trying to plan for this. So, you're planning for, in some ways, the unplanned stuff. But if you look at the way that this is set up, they're basically going to ding folks for reducing their payroll. And if you can, as a business owner, you have the choice between, hey, I can get a loan, I can float my payroll through this loan, and I can have it forgiven for this period of time, and get basically free labor out of the folks that are working for me because the government's going to fund it, or I can lay all these people off, shoot them over the unemployment roll, and destroy a portion of my business because now these are people that I got to go find later as I spin back up. And if I'm wise with this time, I can use that time for training, for process improvement inside my business, There are some things in here around investments inside of the facility and how you can depreciate that, so that accelerates. So this is a great time to invest in your business if you can get through this process and if you can float the cash long enough. Now, it also does not look at compensation of employees in excess of $100,000, but a lot of times those people are able to work and able to add value anyway, and companies aren't necessarily impacting those people right away. So, um, so that's really from a best practice standpoint. If you go down one more slide, I think. Let's see what's in here. All right, go down one more slide. Let's see if we've got it. There we go. All right. So when we think about this, we think about your holistic people system and the stuff that you might be able to do inside of this people system. So we think about strategy, which is all around aligning your organization and what you're trying to accomplish. And then talent, which is once I know what I'm trying to do and I'm aligned, do I have the right people in the right places? And then culture, which is all around the decisions that people make once they have the right objectives, everyone's aligned and the right people are in the right place. So, if you think about just best practices based on what we saw above and how you can leverage folks right now, I think there's a few things. One is, as we've talked about 3 or 4 times now, this is an amazing time to really set up your culture. And your culture is all about what you do in times that are tough. This is a great time to support your leadership, increase the level of communication that you have, train your leaders on how to do that sort of stuff, do some recognition, put those things in, talk to your folks about workplace safety as it relates to, COVID-19, whether that's at home or whether that's in your operation if you're still operational. And then for your business in itself, this is a great time to step back and say, how clear have I been around my mission, vision, my values? How am I using those things to give my organization purpose and to drive alignment? And then the last thing that I think you should be thinking about as a business is talent. And, this is going to sound really crazy and very contrarian, but this should be a time when you're thinking a lot about your talent. And the reason why I think that that's so important is, one, you want to protect the people that are really good on your team, but that's kind of what everybody's doing. I think the real play inside of this is how can you go out in the market and find 2 or 3 really good hires right now? Everybody's letting people go, or if you're somebody that's in a college hire track, or if you're somebody that's trying to build some bench strength, I think that there's going to be a lot of really, really good either early out of college hires to be made, or people who are super talented that got impacted somewhere else that are looking for something. And you probably have a once in a generation access to really, really good talent that you're not going to get your hands on later. And nobody's going to fight you for it because everybody is furloughing and laying off and on a hiring freeze right now. So, if you can swing it, finding a couple really good hires, it sounds crazy, but if the government's covering your payroll, and if you can shore up that part of your balance sheet, this is a great time to get aggressive.
So that was awesome, and I'm going to jump in because the thought was coming to mind. Man, if I'm a leader in a company with all the chaos going on, plus all this new stuff coming at me from Washington, sure. I'm having Martin Lowe on speed dial. Martin, what the hell does this mean? How do I manage this? How do I leverage this? I love that you brought it home to say this is a lot of opportunity. I mean, in the small moments of like literally managing your cash flow right now, all the way up to the macro pieces of you have a chance to really impact your culture and have long-term advantages come out of this in terms of the people you already have really embracing your mission and values and hiring talent outside to make sure you're getting the best opportunities moving forward with the free agents that maybe are suddenly available because of the market situation.
We didn't talk about interns at all, but I guarantee most of the big companies have slashed their internship programs, and there's a whole bunch of college kids who are stuck in their parents' basement looking for anything to do right now besides talk to their parents. So,
Martin, Martin, I wonder what you would say to those who are looking to hire. What are the best ways to go find those people? How would you use LinkedIn or other platforms to go find that kind of talent and get them into the business now?
Well, I think LinkedIn is a great way to do it. I mean, a simple "we're hiring," get in touch with me. Here's what we're looking for. That creates a lot of noise because so many people aren't. We've put almost 100 people into one of the businesses that we're working for right now in the last week and a half. And the message clearly from every one of the people that we've talked to a couple hundred people to get to that number, is, oh my gosh, can't believe you're hiring, super excited to do this, great to see that this is happening, and they're just excited. So, you have this amazing chance to get above the noise because no one's making any noise right now on that front. So, Indeed is free and it's a great way to get something out there. LinkedIn, you can post something up there. Obviously, we help people with that too. It's not a pitch, but you can do that.
Oh, oh,
And then use your network.
yeah. I was going to jump in to
It's
say,
so easy.
and don't be bashful. If you're someone looking for a job right now, go to people that you've worked with before, who trust you as a collaborator, and say, hey, would you mind, making the tweet, posting something and say, hey, this guy or girl who's like, talented. They're not going to be on the market for long. You better grab them. Like, it's okay right now to leverage those really close relationships of people you've worked with in the past to kind of surface that you're available. That's absolutely the best way to get a job. In my experience, anytime you put out sort of a job posting, you get 1,000 things back. And it's so hard to even have the time to look through all that. And your eyes just start to gloss over resume after resume after resume. What really works is when someone I already know and trust comes to me with a recommendation saying, hey, I don't know if you're looking for a designer right now, but I know an amazing designer just became a free agent because the project is over or whatever it is. Oh man, I'm absolutely taking a really hard look at that person and thinking if it fits what we're doing.
I think it connected back to the conversation we had yesterday about collaboration, which is one of the things we talked about was inviting, right? We have to kind of invite people to be collaborative when we're in remote settings. And in this case, the collaboration kind of works both ways and the invitation works both ways. So it could be me going out and doing exactly what you just said, Charlie. Hey, would you mind putting some information out there about me? I've got this opportunity. I'm kind of a free agent right now. I'd love to work on some projects and gain some experience. And then matching that up on the other side of a company saying, this is what we're looking for. We're inviting, not like an RFP, but I guess kind of like a people RFP, right? Where we're looking for these kinds of skill sets. Who can help us do these things now? Let's ramp up and get ready. And I couldn't agree with you more, Martin. I think this is a huge opportunity for companies all across the United States and the globe, for that matter, to begin thinking about, all right, when we emerge from this in a couple of months, how are we going to look different than we are today?
Yeah. I'm going to make one final comment, and then I'm going to throw it to Martin to wrap us up, which is I've done remote work for 10 years. One of the biggest benefits of it, I don't have to hire the best person in my backyard. I can go out and look for the best person in the entire world. That is a huge benefit that companies are going to start to wake up to right now that everyone in the knowledge workspace is working remotely. All right, Martin, really appreciate you running through this today. Any final thoughts?
I think it's two things. One, I feel like everyone's borrowing worry from the future, and borrowing worry. You got plenty to think about today. Don't take tomorrow's stuff on too. That to me is like one of the biggest things as you think about the financial framework and everything that's happening. Just get your head down and think about that and what you need to do today, and then know that there are good things coming out of this. And then if you get ahead of it now, if you start thinking about how you're coming out of this now and set your feet under you now, you're going to be a month or two or three ahead of everybody else that's in that landscape with you. And that's going to pay tremendous dividends. I've talked to a number of entrepreneurs who, if I start out by saying things are bad, they're like, no, this is great. I had a company in '08 and it was a defining moment for us. And while it was really hard for that period of time, we came out of it so good. or same conversations for people that lived through the dot-com stuff in 2000 and the 9/11 stuff in 2001. If you get out of it, the landscape is going to be very, very good for you. And that's what you should start thinking about right now, because everyone else is in crisis management, and you've got to quickly, put a lid on that and then start positioning yourself and your team and get their mind around, we're coming out of this. What are we going to look like when we come out of it?
All right, guys. Thank you again for the time. This is great. A lot of takeaways today. Martin, thanks especially to you for running through all this policy changes. All right, guys. I'll be with you on Monday. See you all.